This is Doug, and you're listening to What's the Hazard? It is February 3rd, Friday here in Omaha, Nebraska. A cold, chilly day out there, but I'm told that it's going to be warm this weekend, so we have something to look forward to. My guest today, you can see him on the screen, the handsome devil behind that, Pete Susca. He is the principal of OpEx Safety, a good friend of mine now. Oddly, we were like brothers, and we had talked about bringing you this series of discussions, conversations about some articles that Pete has written. And we have entitled it, It's Always Bigger Than Safety. It's kind of a look at how safety is really part of a larger organizational system that needs to be appreciated as such and for good reason. And it's the first article is what we're going to try to discuss today. We sent it out ahead of time so that you can have a look at it. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to take a look at it. It is a short article, but there is so much in this. So we've got a lot to talk about, Pete. So I think people that had heard the first episode when you and I spoke before a month or two ago were really, really interested. And all of this obviously hovers around fatality prevention. Everything that we do ultimately hovers around fatality prevention. So give everybody just a little bit of background. You've been doing this a long time, and I don't mean to, I'm not going to say long time, but long time. So give everybody just a little brief introduction, and then we'll get into the meat of the article.
Sure. Thank you, Doug, for having me. And I'm glad we met. I'll be saying that for a long time. No, I've been in the safety operations functional leadership world for over 40 years. I actually got started in the fire service, and I told that story the last time. Mm-hmm. So I have a whole variety of experiences in large corporations, living outside the United States, leading functions such as engineering and quality and the like, and also being in organizations where I had P&L, profit and loss responsibility, and actually running the business. So I think that's really enabled me to see the business world from all different sets of shoes, if you will. Mm-hmm. Okay, which is a really important thing. It's always good for you to understand what it's like being in someone else's shoes, and so that's helped me really kind of establish a connection between things and in a relationship between things.
And so that's really interesting. I didn't know that you were actually running the businesses. I know you had engineering functions, quality functions, but this the ability to see from different perspectives. I think you use the word perspective a number of times in the article, and I circled it every time because the more and more I think about perspective from a risk standpoint, it is so variable. And so this perspective question is really interesting to me, but I'm going to read from your article just to get us started and get this, get the conversation going. And I thought it was interesting. This article series chronicles the principles and techniques that readers can apply to transition safety and the safety profession closer to the core of what organizational leaders value. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Core, moving toward the core, inside out rather than outside in.
Yeah, exactly. I've been in many positions where I felt like I was on an island, and I'm sure some of your listeners feel that way too. They're in a business, but they're on an island. They're that box on the wall that says "break glass" when there's a fire.
Right? Yes, they are. No doubt.
Yeah, call the safety guy, call the safety gal, something bad's happened or whatever it is. Come fix this, come put this fire out. And I was in that world for a while, and I really began to thought of the business as the enemy. There were a lot of people in the business that I thought of it were the enemy. And I evolved. I had to evolve my perspective out of that because I was really put, I was like Rambo, I was like put in the middle of the jungle and I had to fight my way out. Right. And I know some of your listeners probably in the same world.
The vast majority, I would guess.
Yeah. So you're feeling like, wow, I got to figure out how to get people to listen to me and be respected. And so it really is a rethinking of that from the perspective of we as the safety profession need to understand the business and how the business works. See, a lot of the functions are in the world of risk management. The business is in benefit creation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We aren't benefit thinkers. We're risk thinkers. They're benefit thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
So we're coming about this in two different paradigms. Okay. We need to get closer to understand benefit creation, and they need to get closer to appreciate risk creation. And so that's what I'm talking about here, is if we can get closer to understand the way they go about creating benefit, we can create better benefit, more balanced benefit for them, at least in the world of safety. But I think what I've been trying to talk about is how the elements of safety and the reasons for safety elements also can create benefit in other areas that create risk. And so that's what this was all about, was trying to say, look, stop seeing the business as the enemy, and let's work in from another angle. Right. I mean, we've been bashing against the front wall and beating our head against the wall. Let's go around the side door. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just really just kind of a different strategy, if you will.
Getting invited to the head table.
Yeah. Right. Being valued enough as a business peer or contributor. I mean, how many times have I been, and I've seen my clients been shot down bringing up a quality issue or bringing up some cost issue or something like that, and they say, "Go back in your safety box.
We'll call you when we need you."
Yeah, we'll call you. If we got a safety problem, we'll call you.
Exactly. Oh, that is really interesting. So, what's the starting point? I mean, I have this vision of Thanksgiving. And you got the head table where the adults sit, and the little card table that's about 3 inches lower down at the end where the kids sit. And I see the safety guy or gal sitting down there at that little card table and wondering how they can get up to the big boy table. I mean, for those of the listeners that are actually, the safety professional in their organization, and they have the office that's way out in the middle of nowhere because there really is no need for them to be in communication with the other leaders in their minds. What do they do? How do you go about this? Is there a process for that?
Yeah, well, it's a diagnostic first, right? I mean, for me, it's a diagnostic first, and it should be a diagnostic for everyone first. And I think I may have said this before, but I watch a lot of safety professionals try to provide solutions when people don't agree on the problem.
Wow, interesting.
Okay. And the reason why you're getting pushback is they don't see the problem the same way you see the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so where you start is understanding the problem. Is it the way they think about safety? Is it the way they think about you doing safety?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Are you talking about the leaders now? Or are you talking about the leadership?
No. Yeah, the leaders of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Do they see safety as a value, and how do they see it as a value? What's the way they look at safety? Start to look at that, try to understand. Okay, understand first where that's all coming from. And then if they appreciate safety and they don't seem to get along with you well or don't invite you, maybe it's you.
Right. Yes.
No, you really got to look in the mirror sometimes. And that's where I wrote a whole article, which is, I think, the second article after this one, which was, as I wrote this article, and I'm saying to myself, and thank you to the ASSP and the editors of the Professional Safety Journal for listening to me and saying, hey, and then saying, hey, look, we're going to give you a column. I was like, and so after I wrote this first article, I said to myself, okay, I'm going to dress people up, but they're not going to have the ability to do anything with this because of that situation that they're in. So now I'm going to write an article of how to get out of the box you're in. And that's the second article, which is how to get yourself a little bit more appreciated in the organization so that you can start to use these things and help the organization.
Wow, that is such an interesting comment, because I think when you say it's you're probably talking about a combination of certainly personality issues can play some part in this, but the way that the way that we approach the pursuit of our work and this risk control, this attitude, and you see this in different, and I've seen it. I watch it every day where the safety person is, as you said earlier, it's not about benefit to the organization. It's more, condemn, control, criticize, the safety police approach that alienates everyone from the safety element, the component to that organization. And so that critical look in about how we approach this and how we have alienated ourselves from the benefit side of the business, I think is, do you have some in that article? Will we talk about how to do that or what to look for? I don't mean to jump ahead, but I think that's a really critical piece.
Yeah, it is. It is a critical piece. You've got to be able to be positioned to add value beyond safety.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when that's legitimate, then you can kind of work beyond the fact that kind of safety picture that everybody has of you, and it changes their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just give an example. I remember one time, I don't know if I was in Europe at the time, and I was standing up and being my usual Italian passionate self, using my hands and all that. And I could see, this was in the German meeting, I could see these people recoiling. And I sat down next to a guy who I'd kind of, gotten close to. And I said, did I do something wrong? He said, no. He says, we've never seen hands moving so much.
Just the passion.
It was like we don't talk with that level of passion about quality or profit or acquisitions. That was just foreign to us, what you were doing. Sometimes we in the safety profession come at things so passionately that we look like we're a little nuts.
That is a great comment. It is interesting that you say that because it is a very emotional pursuit. And oftentimes when things are going poorly or very badly, it becomes very emotional. And certainly we're talking about, injuries and fatality, things like that. So it absolutely emotional, but it doesn't translate very well into the understanding of the leaders in the organization.
Yeah,
I get a little turned off by that at times, I'm sure.
Exactly. They can. Again, and that's another reason why it may be you, right? It may be your approach. It may be the way you talk about things. It may, all of that. And that's where in that article, I basically said, I need a business mentor. The first thing I tried to do, because here I am in Germany by myself, I'm the only safety leader of all of Europe. I needed to find someone that was in those ranks that could tell me, frankly, what I was doing right and what I was doing wrong in terms of my approach. And fortunately, that ended up being the CFO.
Interesting.
You want to get close to the finance people.
That's a great. Is that something that?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you, man.
No, go ahead.
Is that something that I think that seems like something that would be doable within our organizations here, finding someone in the executive level, the suite where decisions are made that is not a safety person or a risk management person necessarily, at least at risk as we view it, and then get their feedback. That's a really interesting comment.
Oh, it's a really important piece. It really is, because they're helping you with the key to the door.
Yeah.
Right. To the executive kind of door. And, again, I was an executive, but is the safety executive treated like the finance executive, like the HR executive? Again, that's something you need to size up in your organization. And why is that?
Interesting comment, man. And so I have just marked up the article over and over and over. There's so many things that you make, the comments in here that you make. There's some, you refer, I'm going to read again, which is, I know that's a horrible thing to do, but it says, while the safety profession has worked diligently to get the attention of leadership through the moral, ethical, as well as the financial loss value associated with good safety, we must start working safety from inside the business core In the business world, the core is primarily financial, meeting profit, growth, customer, and stockholder expectations. You know, I always refer back to OSHA because that's what I'm most familiar with from a safety perspective. And my perspective has had to evolve quite a bit since I've been out of OSHA. But we used to always encourage safety people to do we had an old program called Safety Pays. Do you remember that at all? It was a tool on the OSHA website where you could talk about direct costs and indirect costs. And we're up there speaking about these things, probably just reading off of a form because we really don't understand them.
Right.
To some degree, in large part. But that was the sales pitch that we were supposed to make to the executives about why this was important. I guess the moral ethical argument from our perspective is the first thing we go to. We have a duty to do this. I used to have a boss at OSHA, and he shall remain nameless, but yeah, I used to go to him all the time emotionally and say, we need to do this because it's the right thing to do. And I would be so passionate, and he would say, what are you talking about? How does it make sense to do this? And I used to get so frustrated with him, but exactly what you're saying, I've come to realize that he wasn't quite the dick that I used to think he was. Maybe he was much more sophisticated manager than I gave him credit for, because my emotional arguments really didn't hold a lot of water, and I wasn't making the connection on the level you're describing.
Yeah, that goes back to that kind of emotion, right? That and being able to see behind it and make your case appropriately, yes. Right? Rather than just by jumping up and down, the sky's falling.
Right. Well, can we talk a little bit about, there are a lot of
let me go back to what you just read, because I think it's a really important piece.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the history in safety, the safety ROI kind of stuff, right? You've seen and read all that safety ROI stuff. The safety ROI is most times predicated on harm and the cost of harm, right? Mm-hmm. Working backwards from the cost of harm. Hey, if you prevent this incident, you prevent this direct cost, you prevent this indirect cost downstream, based on the fact that, you don't have the person to do the job. You got to retrain somebody, you got to pay for them, all of those things. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's kind of loss, right? Predicated on an event, on harm.
Right.
I don't go that way. Though that's valid. That's valid. Again, it predicates, you have to be able to appreciate the potential for harm to be able to accept that case. Mm-hmm. Whereas I look at safety from the perspective of, it's just telling me a little bit about what they're already losing that has nothing to do with safety. Mm-hmm. So when I go into that process and I see safety risk, can I tell a story?
Mm-hmm, please. Absolutely.
I was in Africa at a mining process. I don't know if I told this story before. You're going to have to remind me. Pete, you told this story.
No, this one doesn't sound familiar at all.
Okay, and what they're doing is they're crushing iron ore, and in this crushing process, the truck dumps the raw material into the crusher. The crusher crushes it up, and it goes down through the series of belts and the like. Well, I am looking at this process, and I'm watching these four guys shoveling iron off the ground, into a truck next to the belt. And I see this interlock on this section that they disconnected. And I said to the guy, what are they doing? And he said, well, we're picking up iron that comes off the belt. And I said, have you had any safety issues here? Yeah. He said, that interlock there is because one of those guys lost their arm doing this job. Mm-hmm. Really? I said, what is the business value of this job? See, iron ore, and this goes back to what we were talking about last time when I said you have a mechanized process, you shouldn't have to be sticking your hands and your body into it. That's exactly what they're doing. Why? Because the iron isn't staying on the belt. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it's kind of like you've got your small business and you're making all kinds of cash. You have a cash business, right? And so you get into your convertible. I know you got a convertible, Doug, right? You get in your convertible, you put all of this cash on the seat next to you and you drive to the bank. And you get to the bank and you realize, 50% of my money flew out the convertible.
Mm-hmm.
I call the folks from my business who are actively working, helping customers come out and pick up the money.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What value does that add to have you lose money? And I said to the guy, I said, you see that stuff on the ground? I said, what is it? He said, it's iron ore. I said, no, it isn't. It's money.
Mm-hmm.
It's money. You're losing money. And it's okay to go find it and put it back. No, it's not. And I said, and attached to that is a serious injury and fatality risk that is there for no good reason. An exposure, at least, is there for no good reason. Fix the business issue and process issue, and you won't have a need for any exposure like that. You can put a fence around the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And so,
so there is where you find the business case, and that is, I can tell you how much money you're losing trying to pick up your money.
mm-hmm.
And then when you fix that, what have I just fixed is part of the process. I fixed the safety, and the safety comes along for the ride in the business ROI, not the safety ROI.
Right. I love that. And that is where you're going to gain the attention of those people making those decisions.
Exactly. Now this guy's talking business to us. That's helpful.
Right. Improve that process overall, and safety will come along with it.
Always.
Typically. Always.
Yeah. And that's the other paradigm I think that we have to work within. That remember I talked about putting good paint on a rusty car. Okay. Is we can throw all kinds of safety mechanisms on this process, but they still have to open it up and they still have to clean up the iron.
Right.
Okay. And what are those safety mechanisms dependent upon? Layers and layers of cost and people's reliability and all that. Why?
Right.
Why are we putting those failure modes in for no good reason?
Right. Wow, that's really good, man. Every process then needs to be considered in those terms.
Yes.
Is there a business value to this process? Are we losing because of this process? How do we prevent that loss? And you talk a lot about, companies that are interested in this zero injury world, that we always achieve, we're striving for. But if you're an outcome-based thinker, that you've already lost, your opportunity has already been lost.
Yeah, I mean, I look at companies and I look at the way they talk about how they measure their safety performance. And if they're talking in outcome terms, they're not as evolved as they think they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so this process, that you describe, this relationship between organizational culture and unwanted outcomes, is designed to at least allow them some opportunity to predict. It's a predictive opportunity where you see efficiencies in these predecessors or the antecedents.
Yeah, exactly. It's predicated on the fact that there is a relationship between things, and things are interrelated. And like I said last time, it was like an equation, right? I know this plus this equals that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you understand what it takes to create robust approaches, and you understand what it takes to create imbalanced approaches, and you also know the symptoms of each, the signs and symptoms of each, then you can use this relationship to go and figure out long before events, actually before risk gets created, where risk is going to get created and where events are going to happen, because these things are all predictable.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not a straight line kind of process. It's a relationship about a bunch of different things. I wrote an article way down in the chain called Predicting something or other.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. And it has my kind of graphic in there, which is the analysis that I do in organizations. And I take all of these elements and I write down the factors in there, and then I can plot courses across the factors of failure, right? And you can do that for quality. You can do that for safety. You can do that for ethics, because the factors on the left are the same for everything.
Mm-hmm.
You're the organization sets itself up to fail or succeed by the way it makes decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And that, if you said to me, Pete, in this relationship that you've created here, what's the common thread? What's the the connective tissue? I would say decision making. And I think the safety profession, and it's starting to work its way out of it with I think HOP and Safety 2 and all this other stuff, of thinking as the decision making being at the coal face. That's the decision making we need to focus on. Well, that decision making is resultant decision making. Okay, it's resulting from all of the stuff upstream. Okay, and we're putting people in those situations to make those decisions by the way we make decisions upstream. And I can show you by the path how that happens.
Wow. So you sent me that, I think that diagram, the more detailed elements of this figure,
right?
Which was really interesting. We'll have to get to that at some point, but
yeah, when I throw that in front of people, it's somewhat overwhelming.
It was a little bit overwhelming, and so and even there's so much information in the articles too that I've had to reread them over and over, and every time I read it, I see something else. So this is not easy necessarily. I think the concept is easy, but there's a lot of interesting nuances to this.
Yeah, it's involved. Let's put it that way. I don't think it's complicated, right? It's like dumping a box of puzzle pieces out, 3,000 puzzle pieces, and say, "Oh boy, this is complicated." Well, no, not by piece. It's not, and that's the way we have to take this piece by piece.
Okay, interesting. So, what's the right question? Where do you start? How do you, if you go into an organization, if someone calls you and asks you to come in and give them an evaluation or try to go through that assessment process and identify for them where they are deficient or missing, how do you do that?
I think maybe the best way to talk that is maybe talking through this diagram a little bit,
okay, so
that people can see what each of these pieces is and what's behind them,
how they relate to each other.
Yeah. How about we do that?
Of course.
And then, so a lot of times I start with the outcome and work my way back up because that's the way most people think. But I'm going to start on the other end this time.
Okay.
So on the front end of this whole thing is what you could generically call culture. And I'm kind of getting out of that word because it's just a huge box that is kind of nebulous.
Yeah,
we throw things into it. We can never find what we threw in there.
Yes, no doubt. I totally agree.
So the way I've broken it up is organizational factors and operational factors. And organizational factors are basically the elements, the criteria, the factors in an organization that apply everywhere that organization operates. So if we've got a very large multinational corporation, I'm going to find the implications of these things in China, in Scranton, and in Sao Paulo, everywhere I go, I'm going to see these implications. And what are those implications? Well, it really starts from the way the organization chooses its values and balances its values, and the way that it goes about deploying its business and measuring its performance and hiring its leaders and all of that, right? And deploying its organization in terms of its business units and how they, all of that stuff, how they communicate with each other, how they're designed, all of that, how the way the organization is set up. Okay. Even to the point of where functions being HR and safety, how they're deployed, what their relationships are to the corporate entity, what their relationships are at the plant. I mean, you can see that and the implications of that design to a lowly, safety person in a plant somewhere, that they're set up within that paradigm. Okay. And that's something that gets designed way upstream somewhere. And it's the same everywhere in the world. So organizational factors. Then the next piece is operational factors. Operational factors have I'll call them some tiers to them, right? So it's the business unit that you're in, possibly, right? So some companies are pretty diverse. Business units are very different in terms of the way they do business, their market, the product, the service, okay? Then it's also the country or region, regional culture that is an implication in that business, where that business is located. And then it goes all the way down to the plant culture, where the plants look at the history of the plant, leadership of the plant, all of that kind of stuff, right? So that's operational factors. So you can see in those two layers where the decision-making sets the tone for the downstream decision-making.
No doubt.
Okay. And that's the origin of success and failure right there. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
It's that decision-making is where I spend my time with the executive teams.
I see.
That's their wheelhouse.
Right.
That's their wheelhouse. Once it gets out of them, it gets handed down and down and down, and it gets further down the system, the less capacity those people have to change that.
No doubt. And so that is really fascinating, because as you are describing that, I am envisioning companies that I have worked with, and I can see exactly what you're talking about. It can be, I mean, there are some very obvious elements to those organizations when you go into each of their different locations, but they tend to have a local flavor based on and again, the term culture is so broadly used, but regionally, if you have a national organization, if I go to the same facility in California, Louisiana, up in the Northeast somewhere, Midwest, they tend to take on a little flavor of their own, even though you can see elements of that kind of the overriding umbrella of control. It's really interesting. And that even takes on like national or international aspects, because I've seen companies that are Asian companies, German companies, as you've said, and they all have a different flavor based on those factors as well.
Sure.
It's really interesting how that applies.
Let me give you kind of another story. Story time, folks.
It is. It should be.
I was working with this corporation, let's say it's got 10 plants or so. They make some raw material that's used in products. I don't want to get too specific here. And they've got operations all over the world. And I know that two of their operations, I went and visited one of them. And as I was driving into the plant, I said, oh boy, we're going to have problems here. And I could tell just by the visuals of operational discipline, the cleanliness, where things were coming into the plant. Okay. And I said, interesting, right? Because if we're not disciplined about our decisions in cleanliness, we're not disciplined about our decisions in other things too. Okay. It's a sign. Okay. And once I got there, I was like, oh boy, this plant's way off the mark. Now, in other areas of the world, they've got plants that are running clean and operations are wonderful. Now, back this up, and you got to say to yourself, why is that? How are such significant anomalies and differences allowed in the same business unit? So now it's not the plant. Once you see that, it's not the plant. You got to go up to the next level and say, okay, how is the decision-making in the next level allowing this amount of variation? And one of the first places you go to is what they measure. Okay. If they're measuring results only, outcomes, if they're measuring results only, a lot of what I am seeing is about the how, not the what. Okay. The data going up is the what. And if you're delivering good what data, people may not see how you're doing it.
Oh,
right?
Pete.
You're forsaking your equipment maintenance, you're forsaking your structural integrity, you're forsaking all of this by spending your money on profit-driven pieces of your business, and you're forsaking the rest, right? You're squeezing something to make your numbers.
Oh
And
my
you can
God.
see that,
Yes.
right?
And so wow, that is such a profound observation. And I see that all the time. And I didn't even realize what I was seeing until you just said that. So thank you, because that actually makes sense in my mind, because I go to different locations within the same corporation and see them differently and want to blame the location for that. But it's not necessarily location driven.
Yeah. Should we blame the kids or should we blame the parents? Right.
Wow, man, that is such an astute
And
observation.
maybe the word blame isn't appropriate here, but
Attribute,
it's
whatever.
where is the origin of the problem or the
Right.
imbalance? And I call it imbalance, right?
Mhm.
It's the ability to balance benefit and risk in your value system.
Mhm.
Okay. And when that's imbalance, that's where these opportunities for imbalance perpetuate down into the organization, through the organization. And you'll see it in different ways based on those operational factors. Whatever situation that plant is in, they have the latitude to take advantage of the things that are not getting measured directly.
Right. That's really
Okay.
fascinating.
And so it manifests itself differently, but the reason is the same. So now you got to go back up, and this is what I do, is I go back and try to figure out where this variation is allowable. Why are they are not seeing it at that level? Why, what's the dysfunction up there, right?
Mhm.
And then is it the next level up too, right? I
Mhm.
just keep moving.
Mhm.
And that's not safety. Safety is an indicator of that, but
Right.
when you have that level of dysfunction, it's everything.
Mhm.
Okay. What we're doing here is we're deciding what balls we're going to juggle. We've been given 10 balls. We can only juggle 2. These are the 2 I choose to juggle because these are the 2 that either keep me in my job, keep me out of trouble, keep me successful. And that goes all the way down to the worker. Think about it. The choices that workers make are about expediency and staying out of trouble or easy or whatever it is. They're choosing what balls to juggle to. Why? Because we're giving them multiple balls. We're
Right.
setting them up.
Right.
Okay. And it goes all the way down through the organization that way.
Mhm. Does it? So I'm going to use that same analogy. The balls that we are giving the employees to juggle, we decide on what balls they are even given access to, and then they pick. I mean, ultimately, they are making decisions based on their perception of what is important to us. To some degree.
Yeah, and I think Todd Conklin would talk about it as context, right?
Mhm.
It's the dynamic of the situation that they're in. Okay,
Mhm.
so and everybody's got a little different dynamic and a different day, different hour, right? But that choice is the same.
Mhm.
Again, how they make that choice is dependent upon that situation that they're in,
Right.
right? And
No doubt. Certainly
but it's the choice that's the problem, not the decision.
So explain that.
Well, but that it's an unnecessary choice to have somebody choose between getting that product out and not using the right tool or not using the forklift the right way or whatever it is. That's set up to fail because now they're independent. Those 2 things are independent. Safe way and productive way
Mhm.
become independent choices,
Right.
elements of choice,
Mhm.
whereas they shouldn't be. They should be designed as interdependent. This is the most productive and safe way. And we've set it up this way so that you can do both. And nobody in the system here is going to separate that, right? It makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
And if we can take those forks out of the road, those choices out of the road, and look, sometimes you can't, and you got, and as the HOP folks would say, you got to create this kind of more robust control
Mhm.
or decrease the capacity of somebody to get hurt or all of that. But it's not just safety. Okay.
It's
And that's the point. It's when you're making those choices, it's not good for business.
right. Right. Interesting. So that would be kind of the easy choice is the right choice. We want that, either
Yeah.
eliminate that choice as independent, or at least make the more desirable choice
Yeah,
easier.
here's how to back work that a little bit, and that is, I think in one of your podcasts you just did, you talked about involvement and engagement and
Mhm.
all that, right? And I have the next one in the cycle is ownership.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
and that's where I try to work is look, not deferring ownership from supervisors to workers, but valuing the fact that the workers should own the decisions in their work area
Okay.
and set them up as owners and balancers. Okay. So when imbalance comes to them, they get together and rebalance before they deploy.
Okay.
Okay. Because they own the business piece where they are. Like I said before, I think I said this before, is the executives make the first decision, the workers make the last, and the last one is the one that counts.
Mhm.
The one that counts. And I tell executives this all the time. You have wonderful thoughts about this. I said, but that's not the real world.
That's the tip of
They're
the spear
making
concept.
right. I
Mhm.
said, so let's back work this. Don't we want the workers to feel like they own quality, to own production, own that? So if they own all those things, then they can help balance those things
Mhm.
because we've created imbalance by design.
Mhm.
Okay. And then once that starts working for you, then you start to listen to the workers more. Then you can start to figure out how to create balance by design rather than out in the shop.
Mhm. Wow. Oh my God, man. These are incredible concepts. And they seem, as you describe them, they seem obvious, but as the outside looking in, unfortunately, they don't seem so obvious. So,
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? And I understand that. Like I said, I think I said in the first one, my biggest challenge over the years that I've been talking about this stuff
mhm.
is getting people to see in their heads what I'm talking about. I
Mhm.
mean, I see it pretty clearly.
Mhm.
I see the connection. I see all this coming, but they don't because they're looking at things in very discrete ways. Separate kind of discrete problems, separate things to do, and nothing is discrete.
Mhm.
Everything is interrelated. And
Mhm.
if you believe that, then at least then I can begin to show you how it's interrelated. Because I will tell you, there's nothing that's an anomaly. It's nothing.
Mhm.
Okay. It's related to something. Maybe you're just not seeing it.
Right. Right. That is an interesting concept, because I don't know that I don't know many people that actually. I think most people will profess they understand everything is interrelated, but then they address everything discreetly, as you just said, you know, rather than from an overall organizational operational standpoint. They are looking at safety and then looking at quality. So I guess when you talk about, yes, I understand that all these things are somehow interrelated, but that's not the approach that they take when they're addressing
No.
those things.
And that's not the way the business is set up. I mean, when you look at the business, it's set up vertically, right?
Hmm.
Right from the top, you've got this executive team, and each member of the executive team deploys its functional responsibilities vertically in the organization.
Hmm.
So all of the procedures, all of the decisions, all of the staff, everything gets deployed vertically.
Right.
Okay, until we get to the first line, and now it's like drinking from a fire hydrant. Okay, I got 15 people talking to me about 15 different things I need to do as a first line supervisor. Which one am I going to do? Which one am I not going to do? Because I'll tell you what, I can't do all 15. It's
No
not
doubt.
going to happen.
No
That's
doubt.
the reality of a first line supervisor. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Nice thought, folks.
But yes, all that vertical integration forces everybody into these little fiefdoms and these little,
Exactly.
this is my world of control. And so I am going to exert control over this little piece
Yep.
rather than everything as an interrelated
Yep.
operation.
And that weaves directly into what we were talking about the island of safety. The
Hmm.
quality folks are on an island too. A lot of the other folks are on islands too,
Hmm.
because of the design of the organization, the design of incentive compensation systems, all kinds of things keep people separated.
Mm-hmm. Wow,
it's not good. It's
what do
not
you?
good.
I mean, are there organizations that get it? I mean, have you interacted with organizations that actually get it, and do they change that organizational concept, or how do they approach that?
To some degree. Let me, you know what? Let's go back and keep walking down through. So we got organizational, operational factors, and then what I call at the front line is the management system.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't want us to think of management systems just as safety management systems or quality management systems. I want you to think of it as a kind of a protective layer of the organization that helps the organization make value balanced decisions. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And in safety, we see it for just a safety kind of perspective. But I wrote an article on business management systems, a BMS, which is an integrated management system, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think of your front line of defense as a bunch of posts with no fence in between. Okay,
right.
That's what separate management systems are. Right. Now, when you have an integrated business management system, we're balancing business decisions in an integrated fashion long before they ever get out into the operation. Because now safety is talking to quality as a system perspective, not as two people, one safety person, one quality person saying, hey, how do we get together on this? No, it's by design. And then following that is the design of the organization to achieve that, which is now let's break down these silos, right? That's the paradigm that organizations need to operate in, because that creates a wall of defense and a benefit risk balancing process that's hard to beat.
Right.
And so if that system separately or integrated or related isn't predictive, isn't involved in the decision making, isn't helping balance decision making for those values, and what level of benefit equals what level of residual risk and all of that across the organization, these imbalanced decisions made by those two frontline elements, the organizational factors and operational factors, come through, and they get built into processes. And processes, look at processes just the way we go about doing something simplistically, okay? And it's the way we hire, the way we procure, the way we make parts, the way we acquire. All of those things are all processes. If that process is designed to focus more on benefit than and imbalances another value, safety, quality, cost, whatever it is, okay? If we're focused on one thing so much that we're imbalancing something else so much to the point where it's a threat, and it came through, it gets designed into the process. That process starts to deploy itself, like the example I gave in the first about the grain, the grain situation, right? That's a great example of that, right? An imbalanced process of sales that doesn't balance safety then creates a sale that creates safety risk. And that safety risk can live for long periods of time without manifesting itself into an outcome. And if you're just measuring outcomes and harm, you look good.
You're going to miss that. Yeah, you're not going to.
Well, I mean, you talk to executives all the time. I said, hey, where's your next fatality going to be? They look at me like, what? Yeah, where's your next fatality going to be? What data do you have to tell you that? Predictive data. They don't. They don't. They're looking at OSHA recordables.
Yeah, we didn't have any recordables last year, so we're obviously.
Well, we didn't have any fatalities, right? So the number's 0. We got 0 on the gauge. What's that telling us? I don't know.
No doubt.
It's not telling you how much risk you have.
Right.
It's telling you what frequency of outcomes you've had.
Right.
Not a good indicator.
Not a good indicator at all.
It's on 0. The gauge may not even be working.
Right. Well, oh my God, man. Well, so we are like running up on our time.
Yeah,
so
we could talk about this all day.
This is going to be, so now we have to take our 4-part series and expand it into like a 20-part series, because we're going to have to come back to this article next time we speak. But what, as a take-home message, listeners are primarily safety people. I'm sure there are some small business owners that listen, and maybe some higher level executives, but what take-home message should they have? What homework do you want them to do before the next time we speak?
Well, the easiest homework is working from the bottom up, which is working from the your events that you've had, and beginning to see the processes behind those, not just the safety stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think I talked about the grinding the roller one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take a look at how the work is set up, and does it even make any sense? The situation that the worker has, does it make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't make any sense, somewhere along the line, it doesn't make any business sense. It doesn't just make no safety sense.
Right.
Where you see safety issues, there are other business risks there too, always.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just fix the safety and walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you're doing an incident investigation, you find yourself fixing safety, you haven't fixed the problem.
That's a great point. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately, at those specific points where there is, we've identified safety risk because that's our perspective, there is also a likelihood that we are going to have some type of business failure as well, some type of production failure, material damage, some other inefficiency that is going to affect the overall wellness of the organization.
I will tell you that wellness is being implicated and affected long before the safety stuff was.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked, I think the last one, about the backover fatality in the loading dock, right? The cost of inefficiency at that loading dock has been going on for years, and it got lost in overhead.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they were losing money for years. Nobody saw that. So we had to wait to have a fatality to have somebody like me say, wait a minute, this is not just a fatality risk. You've been losing money for a long time.
Right. It could have been any kind of risk. It could have been a quality risk.
Exactly.
It could
be a minor issue. It doesn't have to be a fatality either. Right. I mean, you've got to be able to see the fact that these little messages that come out of safety are implications of much bigger opportunities for benefit recovery in your organization, not just harm reduction, benefit recovery.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to so I can't stop now because but we have to stop. So that the concept that the HOP people, Conklin and those guys, when they talk about learning teams and they talk about actually interacting and drilling down into some of these processes, and they mask it, kind of, they encompass it in the safety from a safety perspective, but we are looking at process inefficiencies that may have a potential to manifest as a safety related issue. But overall, when we're doing these learning teams and we're interacting with these employees, we need to be looking at the big picture overall, or at least try to capture the big picture from that specific safety risk perspective.
Good example, right? I was in a factory the other day. They make aerospace parts. Okay. And as part of the fixture for this part, there's a bunch of Allen keys, right? And Allen wrenches. This guy has to turn, I don't know, a whole bunch of different Allen keys by hand. And so the Allen wrench is probably 6 inches long, and he needs to torque them by hand. Well, he got tired of doing that, so he figured, I'll get a little length of pipe. Right. So now he's got maybe a 10-inch length of pipe, and he's torquing the Allen keys with the pipe. Okay. Now, what's the torque spec on that? Was it made for hand torquing? Was it designed for the pipe? Now, we could go look at that as a safety perspective. Oh, you're going to hurt yourself. Or maybe we come in after he has hurt himself. I don't know, he dropped the pipe on his foot, or twisted his arm or shoulder. And that's what happens there, right? They tweak themselves trying to put some extra force into this. Wait a minute. Is this even the right way to do the job? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've given people this situation and this way of doing work that you can see why they were trying to work their way out of that. Right. Because it wasn't even designed for a consistent quality well. Mm-hmm. Never mind, trying to create a better situation for themselves. And then possibly tweaking quality because nobody's going back and measuring the torque on these things, right? This guy's signing off a piece of paper, said, "Oh, yeah, I torqued it."
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can see now the implications of that pipe and that decision are much bigger than
it's
safety.
always bigger than safety, right?
Yeah. Who said that before?
I think I've heard that before. Yeah, but it is always bigger than safety, man. And that is such an amazing concept. Pete, I just love this, man. I've been reading these articles now since you sent them to me. I've sent them out to people that I interact with. This is really high level stuff, man. You are much smarter than me. So it's going to take me a while to catch up with some of this stuff. But I love this discussion, and we need to continue this discussion. So we have to wrap up. We're right at our time. I've got to say goodbye. Unfortunately, we could talk about this for hours, but I think this gives everyone a good starting point, gives them food for thought, which is what I really want. I want people to start thinking about these things differently. I want them to read the articles. We'll send out the articles as we go so they can get them and take a look at them. Is there a way they can get to the articles other than through me or you? Are they available somehow, or do we need to keep sending them out?
I think we need to keep sending them out.
Okay, we'll do that. So
we can talk about my frustration offline.
We can talk about your frustration, but let's say that. So if you happen to be on the LinkedIn group that we communicate through, you will be getting these through LinkedIn. So go find them and read them, because this is going to enhance the discussion. But Pete, thank you so much. I apologize. I am like, it's like a lecture to me, because I'm listening, I'm scribbling down notes. I'm trying to absorb the information. It's just such good information, man, that I hope that you will join me again and we can talk more about this. I think this is the direction that most of us need to be going, frankly. So
I appreciate the opportunity, and it's so nice.
It's big
just
stuff.
Having this conversation. It's nice to have a conversational way of talking about these things. I totally
agree. I totally agree. I've got to get out of the studio. There are people standing at the door. Thank you. So have a great weekend.
You too.
Everybody have a great weekend. Enjoy yourselves. Keep doing what you're doing. This is important work. And now it's time to start reading. So we will let you know when Pete's going to join me again, when we're going to do part 2. I'll send an announcement out for that. But pay attention, because it's coming, and we will schedule it and let you know. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you.
Talk to you later, buddy. Bye-bye.